Have you ever really thought about how we know what happened 1,000 or even 1,500 years ago? I mean, we can't just hop in a time machine and check it out for ourselves. So how do we piece together the story of the past? Well, it's kind of like a giant puzzle. And today, we're going to look at some incredible clues hidden in some of the world's most unique historical texts.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big puzzle itself. Then we'll break down the two main types of clues historians use. After that, we are going to zoom right in on our star witness for today, Sri Lanka's amazing ancient chronicles. We'll also get some outside perspectives, and then, to wrap it all up, I'll give you a simple toolkit for how you can start thinking just like a historian.
All right, let's get right into it. Part 1, wrestling with the fundamental challenge of knowing anything about the past for sure.
Now seriously, just think about it for a second. The people who were there are long gone, their buildings might be nothing but dust, and memories, well, they fade. All we've got are the things they left behind, the clues. So our job becomes a bit like being a detective, trying to figure out what story these clues are trying to tell us.
And in the history business, these clues are called historical sources. Now this can be literally anything, a huge monument, a tiny coin, or what we're focused on today, a piece of writing. When historians start to analyze these sources logically, a coherent story about the past starts to emerge. These sources, they are the absolute bedrock of everything we think we know about history.
Okay, so these historical clues, they basically come in two main flavors. Let's break them down and see how they help us build our case.
So on one hand, you've got literary sources, all the books and documents. For our detective work, you can think of this as the witness testimony. It's someone from that time telling us their story, in their own words. And on the other hand, you have archaeological sources, the actual physical stuff they left behind. That's our physical evidence. For today's explainer, we're going to focus squarely on that all-important witness testimony.
And to do that, we are calling a truly incredible witness to the stand, the massive collection of literary sources from the island of Sri Lanka.
Now, what makes these texts so special is how they literally build on each other across centuries. It all kicks off in the 4th century with a text called the Dipavamsa. A century or two later, a monk named Mahavamsa writes the Mahavamsa, which means the Great Chronicle, to create a much more detailed and accurate record. Later on, another text is written just to explain and annotate the Mahavamsa. But here's the truly amazing part. For centuries after that, different authors just kept adding to it. They kept the story going. This created this almost unbroken written history, something that is incredibly rare anywhere in the world.
You know, this quote really gets to the heart of it. To have such a continuous historical story written over hundreds and hundreds of years within a single evolving text, it's just not something you see every day. It's a huge point of cultural pride, and for good reason.
But here's the thing about any investigation. You never, ever want to rely on just one witness, no matter how reliable they seem. To get the whole story, the full picture, you've got to find other voices, other perspectives.
And believe me, there were plenty of other voices. Beyond those official chronicles, Sri Lankan literature is just brimming with different kinds of texts that give us a much richer picture of the past. For example, you have things called Sandesha Kavya, which were these beautiful poetic messages, almost like sending a postcard, but in verse. Then there are Prashasti Kavya, which were basically poems of praise for rulers, great for understanding what royal PR looked like back then. And you had Hattan Kavya, which were epic war poems. Each one gives us a totally different, but totally crucial angle on the culture.
Okay, so we've heard from the local witnesses. Now it's time to bring in some people from out of town, the foreign observers and travelers who also wrote down what they saw.
So why were so many outsiders writing about this one island? Well, you have to remember, Sri Lanka has always been a major crossroads. It had these ancient, bustling trade routes crisscrossing the Indian Ocean, really deep historical ties with India, and then later on, a whole lot of interest from European powers starting around the 16th century. All those visitors meant more eyes on the island, and lucky for us, more people writing things down. And the sheer variety of these perspectives is just wild. I mean, look at this list. You have an account from Fa Xian, a Chinese Buddhist monk who visited way back in the 5th century. Fast forward a few hundred years, and you get the famous Arabian traveler Ibn Battuta writing about his journey. Then you jump into the early modern era, and you get these super detailed accounts from Portuguese, Dutch, and English writers like Robert Knox. Every single one gives us this invaluable outsider's view, which helps us either back up or question what the local stories are telling us.
And that brings us to the most important part of this whole thing. We've got all this testimony, right? From locals, from foreigners, all of it. But a good detective and a good historian knows you can never just take it all at face value. You have to cross-examine your witnesses.
This is the key takeaway, right here. Every single one of these sources was written by a person, a human being, with their own perspective, their own agenda, and their own biases. Our job isn't just to collect their stories, it's to figure out why they told the story the way they did.
So how do we do that? Well, here's the basic toolkit. It really just boils down to 4 simple questions. First, when was it written? Are we talking about an eyewitness account or something jotted down centuries after the fact? Second, who wrote it? Was it a monk, a king, a merchant? Their social position changes everything. Third, why was it written? Those early Sri Lankan chronicles, for example, often had very specific religious goals, and that shaped what they chose to include and what they decided to leave out. And finally, how did they get their information? Were they actually there, or were they just repeating stories they'd heard? Asking these questions is what takes you from just reading history to actually analyzing it.
And that's really it. Just 4 little questions: when, who, why, and how. If you can master these, you're not just a reader of history anymore. You're a detective.
Because when we do this work, when we dig in and analyze these texts with a critical eye, their value is just immense. They help us build a timeline of events. They give us these rich details about politics and society. We can use them to check against what archaeologists are digging up. And they show us this long, fascinating history of how different parts of the world have always been connected.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Just like we're questioning the motives and perspectives of these ancient writers, historians in the future will one day do the exact same thing to us. So, what stories are we telling right now in our books, on the news, on our social media feeds that they will have to pick apart and cross-examine just to figure out what really happened in our time? Thanks for watching.